Imagine, right now, wherever you are sitting or walking, trying to point perfectly flawlessly southeast.
Right, like instantly.
Yeah, instantly. Not a vague gesture, but absolute dead center southeast. And you have to do it without checking your phone, without looking at the sun, and, without hesitating for even a fraction of a second.
I mean, most of us would completely fail at that.
Oh, absolutely. We'd wave our hands around, guess based on a window, maybe try to mentally picture a map of the city.
Exactly.
But if you were raised in a specific Aboriginal Australian community, your brain would do it effortlessly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, simply because your language requires you to know exactly where southeast is, just to say hello to your neighbor.
It's wild to think about. We are diving into the architecture of reality itself today.
We really are. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. I'm so glad you're here with us today because we are tackling the ultimate cognitive chicken and egg conundrum.
Yeah, and we're looking at some incredible notes and sources on this.
Right. We're bypassing all the heavy academic jargon to look directly at the blueprints of the human mind. Today, we are looking at the terrifying, beautiful reality that the language you speak is actively dictating what your brain is allowed to perceive.
For a long time, the general assumption has been that the world just exists, right? It's objective, and humanity simply invented different vocal sounds to point at the things in it.
Like a tree is a tree, whether you call it arble, arbora, or tree.
Exactly. But the sheer volume of linguistic data we now have points to a much more complex, honestly kind of unsettling mechanism. The words you use do not simply label a static pre-existing world. They actively shape, construct, and in many ways fundamentally limit the very reality you are neurologically capable of experiencing.
Which is it's a massive concept to wrap your head around. But if you're curious about how the world actually works and why someone from a different background might genuinely see a completely different world than you do, this is the foundational layer.
It really is. Understanding this relationship between what you say and what you can think is the master key to unlocking true cognitive flexibility.
So we're going to explore how language physically alters your perception of color, how it turns certain human beings into walking compasses, and this is the craziest part to me, how specific grammar rules might literally dictate who you blame for a tragic accident.
Yeah, when you realize that your mother tongue has curated your reality, you stop seeing other cultures' perspectives as merely different opinions. You start recognizing them as entirely different cognitive ecosystems.
It's the absolute bedrock of genuine empathy. So to understand how deep this goes, we have to start at ground zero of this entire field of thought, and that is the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Ah, yes. Named after Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf. This is basically the granddaddy of all linguistic theories.
Right, and historically, the sources show it's broken down into two distinct forms. Understanding the difference between these two is, well, it's crucial before we get into the mind-bending examples. So let's look at the strong version first. Linguistic determinism.
So, linguistic determinism posits a hard biological and cognitive limit. The core argument here is that language rigidly and literally determines your thought.
Meaning, if I don't have a word for it, I can't think it.
Exactly. If you subscribe to this strong version, you believe that the cognitive categories, the very concepts available to your conscious mind, are strictly defined by the grammar and vocabulary of your native tongue.
So if my language lacks a word for a specific concept, I am biologically, fundamentally incapable of understanding that concept.
That is the exact implication, yeah.
Wow. It sounds like a cognitive prison built entirely out of vocabulary.
It does. Whorf initially leaned heavily into this idea. He studied indigenous languages and suggested their unique grammars created realities so divergent from Western thought that they were essentially untranslatable, like in any meaningful cognitive sense.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because if this strong version is true, how do we explain the human ability to grasp foreign concepts that lack direct translations?
Right, that's the big question.
Like, take the German word schadenfreude, taking pleasure in someone else's misfortune. English doesn't have a native single word that captures that exact psychological phenomena.
No, it takes us a whole sentence to explain it.
Right. But the second I explain the concept to an English speaker, they know exactly what that feels like. We've all felt it. Or the Danish concept of hygge, that very specific type of cozy, convivial winter contentment.
Oh, I love that word.
Me too. And we lack a one-to-one English equivalent, but we can absolutely understand, crave, and experience it. So doesn't our ability to comprehend these concepts immediately shatter the strong version of linguistic determinism right out of the gate?
It shatters it completely, and that is precisely why the academic and scientific community has largely discarded the strong version.
Because it's just too extreme.
Exactly. It's an extreme, easily falsifiable position. The human mind is remarkably elastic. We are clearly capable of perceiving, feeling, and grasping complex concepts that our mother tongue simply hasn't bothered to assign a neat, localized label to.
So the human brain is not a prison.
No, it's a highly adaptable processor.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like claiming that because I don't know the word aerodynamics, I am incapable of understanding that a paper airplane glides. It just defies basic human observation.
Exactly. Because of that glaring flaw, the consensus shifted entirely to the weak version of the hypothesis. This is what we now call linguistic relativity.
And this one makes a lot more sense based on the research.
It does. It's far more nuanced, it's scientifically measurable, and frankly, profoundly interesting. Linguistic relativity steps back from the idea that language dictates thought and proposes instead that language deeply, pervasively influences thought.
So it creates like predispositions.
Precisely. It creates cognitive grooves. It doesn't make a certain thought biologically impossible, but it makes certain ways of thinking much easier, much more immediate, and highly habitual compared to others.
Let's visualize this because there's this brilliant analogy in the source material that makes it incredibly clear. Imagine your mind is facing a massive, untouched, pristine field of snow.
Okay, I love this analogy.
Right. That vast field represents all possible human thoughts, all the infinite ways you could potentially categorize the universe. Now, technically speaking, you possess the legs and the capacity to walk absolutely anywhere in that snowy field.
You have the raw biological hardware to form any concept.
But if a language has already walked a specific path through that snow, if your culture has been treading that exact same line for thousands of years, packing it down into a smooth, icy trail, that becomes the default.
It's the path of least resistance.
Exactly. If language is a pre-walked path in this snowy field, it doesn't mean I am physically forbidden from stepping off it and trudging through the fresh, waist-deep snow to form a new thought. But why would I burn the energy? My brain is inherently lazy.
And we know this from neuroscience. The brain is an ultimate energy conservation machine.
Yeah, it uses so much energy for its size, right?
It does. It consumes roughly 20% of the body's energy while only accounting for 2% of its weight. It is constantly looking for shortcuts to minimize caloric expenditure.
So it wants the easy road.
Always. If your language provides a default packed-down route for your thoughts, your brain is going to take it 99% of the time. The friction of stepping into the deep snow trying to conceptualize reality outside of your native grammar requires immense conscious effort and metabolic energy.
So linguistic relativity explains how these cognitive grooves operate. They don't make a thought mandatory, they just make it automatic.
Spot on.
Okay, abstract philosophy and snowy fields are great for setting the stage, but to really understand how deep this pre-walked path actually goes, we need to look at how it physically changes our senses.
Yes, let's get into the physical data.
Because this doesn't just alter how we muse about the world in a coffee shop. It seamlessly leads into how language impacts the most visceral sense most of us rely on: sight. Let's look at color perception.
What's fascinating here is that color perception is one of the most rigorously tested arenas for linguistic relativity because the overarching assumption for the average person is that color is an immutable objective physical reality.
Right, it's physics. Light bounces off a surface, hits the retina, and the wavelengths dictate the color. We just assume a certain nanometer wavelength is objectively blue, regardless of what language you speak.
Well, the physics, the wavelength of the light itself, is a constant, but the perception of that physics, the actual mechanism by which your brain sorts and consciously registers those wavelengths, is heavily mediated by your language.
And the classic, definitive body of research on this focuses on native speakers of the Russian language.
Yes. To understand this, we have to compare it to English.
Right, so in English, we have a massive, all-encompassing umbrella word, blue. We can modify it like light blue, sky blue, navy blue, dark blue. But fundamentally, the root category is just blue. If you ask me to sort of pile of paint chips, all those variations go into the blue bucket.
But Russian operates on a fundamentally different categorization system. They do not have a single word for blue.
Wait, really? No single word at all?
They lack that overarching umbrella category entirely. Instead, they have two entirely distinct basic color categories. They have goloboy, which roughly aligns with what an English speaker calls light blue, and they have sini, which translates to dark blue.
The crucial distinction here, and this is what blew my mind in the research, is that goluboy and sini are not adjectives modifying a root color.
No, they aren't.
To a native Russian speaker, these are as completely different and mutually exclusive as green and purple are to an English speaker.
A very helpful parallel for an English speaker is to consider how we treat the colors red and pink. Technically speaking, from a purely physical standpoint, pink is just light red.
Right, but no English speaker looks at a flamingo and thinks, ah, what a beautiful light red bird.
Exactly. We have elevated that specific tint to its own absolute standalone category. Pink is pink, red is red. They occupy totally different conceptual spaces in our minds. To a Russian speaker, goluboy and sini possess that exact same hard, impenetrable categorical boundary.
Okay, so they have two words where we have one. That's a linguistic difference. But the research takes this a step further and proves that this vocabulary actually alters visual performance, doesn't it?
It does, measurably. When researchers put native Russian speakers and native English speakers in front of a screen and timed how fast they could visually distinguish between different shades of blue, the Russian speakers were demonstrably faster.
How did the test actually work?
So participants are shown 3 squares of color, 1 on top, 2 on the bottom. They are asked to press a button indicating which of the bottom 2 squares perfectly matches the top square.
Pretty straightforward.
Right. But when the 2 bottom squares fall into different linguistic categories for a Russian speaker, say one is goluboy and the other is sini, their reaction time is incredibly fast. When both squares fall into the same category, say they're both variations of sini, their reaction time slows down.
Because it takes more effort to distinguish within the same category.
Exactly. But English speakers who just see varying shades of the singular category blue do not show the speed advantage when crossing the goluboy-sini boundary. To an English speaker, they're all just blue.
So are you saying their eyes, like the actual biological rods and cones, are physically receiving different light waves? Or is something happening deeper inside the machinery? Is their brain just sorting the visual data faster because the folders for those colors already exist on their mental desktop?
It's the latter. The hardware of the eye is identical. The rods and cones are firing in the exact same way. The divergence happens in the visual processing centers of the brain.
Oh, wow.
The Russian brain is utilizing linguistic categorization as a high-speed neural shortcut. The language has already pre-sliced that specific part of the visual spectrum.
Think about it like a computer's desktop environment. An English speaker looks at a gradient of blue. Their visual cortex receives the raw data, identifies it as blue, but then to complete the task of figuring out which shade matches which, the brain has to do a secondary conscious layer of processing.
Yes. It has to look at the 2 blue squares and calculate, okay, this one is slightly lighter in hue than the other one.
And that secondary calculation burns milliseconds of computational power.
Meanwhile, the native Russian speaker's brain already has permanent hard-coded folders labeled goluboy and siniri integrated into their visual processing pipeline.
So it's instant.
Instantly routed into 2 distinct neural pathways. There is no secondary processing required to differentiate them because the language has pre-processed the visual data on behalf of the conscious mind.
So the language I speak is literally acting as a physical filter on my eyeballs. It is dictating the frame rate of my reality, altering how quickly I can parse the physical universe.
It forces us to accept that language isn't just a descriptive tool, it's an active participant in sensory perception. Your vocabulary is quite literally shaping the speed and mechanism of your sight.
Okay, if language can alter how we perceive something as static as color, what happens when it dictates how we move through the physical world? Let's move from how we see reality to how we navigate it.
Oh, this is one of my favorite examples.
Because we have to talk about the Cook Thayor, an Aboriginal community in Australia. The source notes on this are just, they're staggering.
The cognitive reality of the Cook Thayor provides one of the most extreme, undeniable demonstrations of linguistic relativity ever documented. It fundamentally upends how most of the global population relates to space.
In English, and in the vast majority of languages spoken globally today, we navigate the world using what is called an egocentric coordinate system.
Right. We rely heavily on relative spatial terms. Left, right, in front of, behind.
Meaning these terms are entirely dependent on the physical orientation of the speaker. They're relative.
If we are facing each other, my left is your right. The entire spatial universe revolves around the individual. You are the center of the compass.
But the Kuuk-Thaayorre language entirely lacks these relative spatial concepts. They do not possess a word for left or right or forward or backward.
None at all.
Instead, they exclusively use absolute cardinal directions for everything: north, south, east, and west.
And this isn't just for large-scale navigation, like saying the next town is to the north. They use this absolute system for the micro scale of daily human interaction.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Imagine sitting at a dinner table. If I want you to move your water glass in English, I say, move the cup a little to your left.
But a Kuuk-Thaayorre speaker would have to say, move the cup a little to the north-northwest.
Which sounds so formal to us. Or if there is a bug crawling on you, they wouldn't say, there's an ant on your right leg. They would say, there's an ant on your southwest leg.
Consider the immense cognitive ramifications of this grammatical requirement. To speak this language fluently, to even utter a basic, coherent sentence about your immediate environment, you must be perfectly oriented to the planet's cardinal directions at every single moment of your life.
It's as if their language forces them to have a compass constantly running as a background app in their brain.
That's a perfect analogy.
Whereas English speakers just navigate by whatever's right in front of their face. I mean, you could spin an English speaker around in a windowless room, and they can still speak perfectly fine because their spatial language is tied to their own body. My nose is in front of me, my arms are to my sides.
But to speak Kuuk-Thaayorre, you have to know where north is even if you are in the dark, in a cave, or falling out of a tree.
It acts like a biological GPS system. The cognitive load required to maintain that spatial awareness is something an English speaker can barely fathom.
Oh, totally. If you ask an English speaker to point southeast in a closed building, it requires intense conscious calculation, visualizing the sun, remembering the building's orientation to the street, and they will still likely get it wrong.
I would definitely get it wrong.
But for a Kuuk-Thaayorre speaker, pointing southeast is as effortless and immediate as you knowing which hand is your left hand.
Because their language refuses to give them the luxury of spatial ignorance. They are physically tethered to the rotation and magnetic poles of the earth through their grammar.
And it doesn't stop at physical navigation. It results in fundamentally different, moment-to-moment lived cognition. It bleeds into entirely different cognitive domains, like how they perceive and organize time.
Oh, this part blew my mind. Okay, if you give an English speaker a stack of photographs showing a man aging from a baby to an old man and ask them to arrange the photos in chronological order, they will almost always lay them out from left to right.
Because English is written left to right, we spatialize time on a left to right axis.
But if you ask a Kuuk-Thaayorre speaker to arrange those same photos, their arrangement depends entirely on which way they are facing.
Yes, time does not lock onto their body, it locks onto the landscape.
If they are sitting facing north, they will arrange the photos from east to west, so from their right to their left. If they're facing south, they will arrange them east to west again, but now that means left to right across their body.
To them, time doesn't travel across the individual, it travels across the land itself.
Their entire conceptualization of time and space is externalized. It is deeply humbling to realize that something as basic as, where am I and when is this happening, is entirely dependent on the specific words you learned as a toddler.
It truly is.
So we've seen how language maps our physical space, but the sources show it also maps our moral space. Let's look at how grammar shapes justice and memory.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this transition from the physical to the moral is where linguistic relativity carries immense real-world weight. We have to look at the groundbreaking work of cognitive psychologist Lera Boroditsky.
Right, her research zeroes in on how different languages structure the concept of agency, specifically who is doing what to whom and how that is encoded in our memory.
Let's break down her methodology because the experiment itself is fascinating. Boroditsky focuses on accidental events. Imagine a very simple scenario. Someone bumps into a table and a vase falls off and shatters.
Okay, got it.
In English, our grammatical structure is intensely agent-focused. If we describe that event, we are almost forced to say, John broke the vase.
The agent, John, is the subject. The language places him front and center, actively executing the verb. English grammar demands a subject for almost every action, meaning the language inherently forces you to highlight the person responsible, even if the action was entirely accidental.
Exactly. Now, Boroditsky contrasts this English framework with languages like Spanish or Japanese. In those languages, if an event is clearly an accident, it sounds profoundly unnatural to use an agent-focused structure.
So they wouldn't say John broke the vase.
No, instead of saying that, they use an event-focused construction that translates closer to the vase broke itself, or simply the vase broke.
The language actively de-emphasizes the agent. The grammatical focus is squarely on the state change of the object, the fact that a vase shattered, rather than pointing a finger at the clumsy human who inadvertently caused it.
Right, and you might think this is just a polite cultural quirk, right? Just a nice way of speaking. But Boroditsky's studies revealed that this grammatical difference fundamentally rewires eyewitness memory.
This is where it gets scary.
It does. In the studies, researchers showed the exact same video of an accidental event to native English speakers and native Spanish or Japanese speakers. Later, they tested their recall of the video.
Yeah, what happened?
The results were stark. Because English grammar trains its speakers to constantly look for the agent to answer the implicit question of, who did this? The English speakers were highly accurate at remembering who accidentally popped the balloon or knocked over the vase.
But the Spanish and Japanese speakers showed a massive statistical drop in their ability to remember the person who caused the accident.
They remembered the details of the event perfectly, the color of the vase, the way it shattered, but their brains simply didn't encode the identity of the person because their language hadn't trained them to prioritize that specific piece of data in an accidental context.
Their cognitive software essentially deemed the agent irrelevant to the memory of the event. Now wait. If grammar decides what we remember about an accident, doesn't this mean eyewitness testimony is inherently biased by the native language of the witness? Could you manipulate a person's memory just by asking them questions in a different grammatical structure? Like, if a police officer arrives at the scene of a car crash and asks an English-speaking witness what happened, their brain has already highlighted the agent.
Yes, and consider how easily that memory could be manipulated during an interrogation. If an attorney asks, "Did you see him smash the car?" versus, "Did you see how the car got smashed?" They are not merely asking for different subjective interpretations. They might actually be altering the cognitive retrieval of the memory itself.
In an English-speaking legal system, the entire apparatus is obsessed with finding the agent. The grammar demands a subject, so the justice system demands a culprit. Who is to blame?
But in a culture whose language de-emphasizes agency and accidents, the moral and legal focus might naturally drift away from punishing the individual and toward repairing the damage or addressing the environment that caused the accident.
Language subtly, invisibly nudges what we pay attention to. What we pay attention to determines what we remember. What we remember shapes our moral focus.
And that moral focus scales up to construct an entire culture's legal system and societal values.
We tend to think of memory like a highly accurate video recording on a hard drive, but it's really more like a police sketch. And language is the hand guiding the pencil. It dictates which details are meticulously drawn in and which are left completely blank.
It is a sobering realization that our internal reality, our sense of justice and truth, is deeply curated by the arbitrary grammar rules developed by our ancestors.
With all these profound differences, it raises a massive philosophical question. Are we really that fundamentally different from one another, or is this just window dressing on the same human brain? Or a Russian speaker, an Aboriginal Australian, and an English speaker living in genuinely irreconcilable cognitive universes?
This is the domain of the universalist counterargument, and it is a necessary and robust pushback against the extremes of linguistic relativity.
We have to dive into the translatability debate.
Right. The universalists look at all these fascinating examples and say, yes, these cognitive grooves exist, but they do not negate our shared underlying humanity.
The argument basically hinges on teachability, right?
Yes. They point out that while it is amazing that the Cook Thayor have a compass brain, an English speaker can be taught to use absolute directions. I can buy a compass, go out into the woods, practice for a few months, and learn to navigate strictly by north and south.
And an English speaker can absolutely be trained in a laboratory setting to visually differentiate between the Russian Goluboy and Thinny with increased speed. It takes practice, but the biological capacity is there.
Even the cook that your speaker can be taught the Western concept of left and right. So the core universalist argument is that if we can translate these concepts across linguistic boundaries, if we can teach the underlying thought regardless of the starting language, then the underlying thought must exist independently of language.
It's the whole hardware versus software metaphor.
Exactly. Universalists argue that the human brain, our raw cognitive processing power, our neuroanatomy, is the universal hardware. We all share the same biological processor and memory banks.
And the thousands of different languages spoken across the globe are simply different software packages or operating systems running on that identical hardware.
So in this analogy, English is like a Windows operating system, Russian is like Mac OS, and Kuktayor is some highly specialized open source Linux distribution built specifically for hardcore navigation.
I get the hardware-software analogy. It is clean and comforting. But I'd argue it's like explaining what a roller coaster feels like using physics equations.
That is a phenomenal way to frame the friction of translation.
Think about it. The math, the physics equations detailing gravity, velocity, the apex of the curve, the specific g-forces, perfectly translates the reality of the roller coaster. Every single data point is accounted for on the paper, but reading that equation while sitting at a desk does not make your stomach drop.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't make your palms sweat. You aren't feeling the wind violently whipping against your face. The translation is technically mathematically accurate, but it is utterly devoid of the visceral, physical reality of the experience itself.
Which perfectly aligns with the relativist counterargument regarding dictionary definitions. Universalists claim that clumsy translation proves we share the same cognition. But let's return to the word schadenfreude.
If I translate schadenfreude into English, I end up with a clunky, multi-word phrase. Pleasure derived from another person's misfortune? That is a highly intellectualized description. It is a cumbersome exercise in linguistic assembly.
But for a native German speaker, that single word is an immediate, culturally embedded cognitive reality. It fires instantly in the emotional centers of the brain. There's no intellectual assembly required. The feeling and the word arrive simultaneously.
When you break it down into an English dictionary definition, something vital, the immediacy, the emotional resonance, the cultural weight, is irreparably lost in translation.
Yeah.
You are reading the physics equation instead of writing the coaster.
So is the speed of the thought the actual deciding factor between a native speaker and someone reading a translation?
Returning to our earlier analogy, the translation is me trudging through waist-deep, freezing snow, exhausted and sweating, just to reach the exact same destination that a native speaker slides to effortlessly on a paved, heavily waxed sled track. Yes, we both technically arrived at the same concept, but the journey was fundamentally different, and that difference in the journey matters.
The truth is a dynamic synthesis. We do possess shared human hardware. But the software deftly molds it over time through neuroplasticity. It dictates which neural pathways are reinforced through daily repetition and which are pruned away through neglect. It's a complex, inextricable feedback loop.
We've established that the truth is a synthesis. We have shared hardware, but the software molds it. So what does this all mean for the listener right now, especially if they're trying to learn something new?
When we analyze the brain of a language learner, we witness the real-world biological application of linguistic relativity. Learning a new language is profoundly misunderstood by most beginners. They assume it is merely a matter of rote memorization, swapping out an English vocabulary tag for a Spanish or Mandarin tag, and slapping it onto the exact same underlying concept.
They think they're just learning a new synonym for blue.
Exactly. But as we've seen with the Russian blues or the Spanish accidental events or the Kuktayor compass directions, the concepts themselves often have entirely different boundaries, focal points, and requirements. When you learn a new language, you are not just acquiring a new labels, you are actively rewiring the hardware.
You are forcing your brain to carve entirely new paths in that snowy field.
Anyone who has studied a language knows about the ultimate milestone, the holy grail of fluency, thinking in the target language. It is that sudden, shocking moment when you realize you aren't mentally translating a sentence into English before you speak. You just speak.
Because it means you have stopped running thoughts through the old software and are generating natively in the new system.
That is a crucial neurological milestone. You have successfully installed and booted up a new cognitive framework alongside the original one.
So what does this all mean for the struggle of learning? The headache you get when studying intensely isn't a glitch in your system. It's the feeling of your brain literally building new neural pathways. It's like doing a software update while the computer's still running. Of course, the fan is going to spin loudly.
What the science of linguistic relativity suggests is that this friction is not a failure of intelligence. It is the very specific biological sensation of your native language failing to adequately prepare your brain for a completely new way of partitioning reality. The old cognitive grooves are resisting the creation of new ones.
The struggle you feel is the physical manifestation of your cognitive flexibility expanding in real time.
It radically shifts our perspective on what it means to become fluent or deeply educated. Every untranslatable word you finally grasp, every bizarre grammatical structure that forces you to totally rethink how time flows, how space is organized, or who is to blame in an accident, these aren't just academic hurdles to clear for a test. They are brand new tools being permanently integrated into your cognitive toolkit.
It's quite literally like discovering a brand new color on the visual spectrum that your eyes were previously blind to.
And this brings us to the profound humanistic core of this science. Enduring that cognitive friction to learn how another culture speaks isn't just about communication. It is an act of profound cognitive expansion. And because you are training your brain to inhabit an entirely different conceptual framework, it fosters the deepest possible level of empathy.
Empathy, because you aren't just memorizing what a person from another culture thinks, you are neurologically simulating how they think. You are walking the exact paths in the snow that their ancestors laid down.
Precisely. When you genuinely understand why a specific language actively de-emphasizes personal blame, or how a language forces a perpetual connection to the cardinal directions of the earth, you stop judging them by the metrics of your own language. You are understanding the very architecture of their lived reality.
So, to synthesize everything we have explored today, the relationship between language and thought is a dynamic, inextricable dance. Thoughts give rise to language, and language structures future thoughts.
It is the ultimate feedback loop.
Historically, the thoughts and environments of your ancestors gave rise to your language. But today, right now, that language stands as the invisible scaffolding that guides, limits, refines, and accelerates your future thoughts. When you open your mouth to speak, you aren't just looking for labels. You are navigating an entire universe of thought, carving deep paths into the snow and defining the literal boundaries of your own reality.
And as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, deeply thought-provoking question to mull over on your own. It builds on everything we've established today regarding the immense power of cognitive software, but it points toward our immediate future.
Oh, I'm ready. Lay it on us.
If human languages inherently shape how we perceive blame, space, and memory, what happens as we train artificial intelligence using these exact same languages? The vast majority of the foundational large language models are trained overwhelmingly on English data. Are we unknowingly, systemically hardwiring our specific, highly localized linguistic biases, like our English focus on agents and assigning blame into the digital minds of the future? When an AI makes a moral calculation, is it thinking objectively, or is it merely thinking exactly like an English speaker?
Oh, wow. If language is the blueprint that builds the mind, and we are handing artificial intelligence our highly specific, culturally biased blueprint, that fundamentally alters how we should view artificial reasoning. It might not be artificial intelligence at all. It might just be artificial English intelligence.
It's a lot to think about.
It really is. Well, on that incredibly heavy, mind-bending note, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It has been an absolute privilege to explore these concepts with you.
We hope this conversation sparked some profound realizations and equipped you with a completely new lens to look at the words you use, read, and think every single day. Keep questioning the blueprints you were handed. Lean into the friction of learning something new, and remember that every time you master a new way to speak, you are building an entirely new room in the architecture of your mind. We will see you on the next deep dive. So, I want you to picture something for a second.
Okay, what are we picturing?
I want you, the listener, to try and picture the absolute most vivid memory you have.
Oh, wow. That's a big request right off the bat.
Right. But just, think of a moment in your life that you feel you could play back with just flawless clarity.
Like a high-definition movie.
Exactly, yeah. Maybe it's, I don't know, the exact layout of your childhood bedroom.
Or the precise expression on a friend's face during like a really pivotal conversation.
Yeah, or even something stressful, like the undeniable sequence of events during a minor car accident you were in years ago.
Those definitely stick with you. Or so we think.
Exactly. You hold that mental image in your mind, and it feels solid, right?
It has real weight to it.
It does. It feels like this concrete historical record, like it was shot on a video camera, filed away in the secure vaults of your brain, and you're just, hitting the play button right now.
Yeah, and it's a very comforting illusion, honestly.
Illusion being the key word there.
Right, because the subjective feeling of certainty that accompanies our memories is, it's so profound that we rarely ever think to question the actual architecture of the memory itself.
We just take it for granted.
We really do. We just assume the playback is a faithful, totally accurate rendering of reality.
But today, we are taking a massive stack of research notes and clinical literature from the Advanced Learner Studio.
And this stuff is just wild.
It really is. And the mission of this deep dive is to basically completely dismantle that illusion for you.
We are going to tear it all down.
We're going to explore why literally everything you think you know about how you remember your own life is fundamentally completely flawed.
It's a bit unsettling, but it's important.
It is. We're stepping into this surprisingly treacherous territory where neuroscience basically crashes into human storytelling.
What's fascinating here is the sheer scale of the paradox we are dealing with.
Right, because it affects everyone.
Exactly. As you said, memory feels like the absolute bedrock of human identity. It feels like solid stone.
But the sources say otherwise.
Oh, completely. The clinical data, the neuroimaging, decades of cognitive psychology, it all reveals that this bedrock is actually much more like shifting sand.
Shifting sand. That's a great way to put it.
And understanding why it shifts is arguably the most important key to understanding human behavior as a whole.
Okay, so we need to start by tearing down the metaphor that almost all of us unconsciously use.
The library metaphor.
Yeah, exactly. For a long time, people compared human memory to a physical library.
Like you have a fact or an experience, right?
Right, and you put it in a book, you slide it onto a specific shelf.
And then when you need it, you just, walk down the aisle and pull it back out.
Exactly. But today, we've kind of updated the metaphor to a computer hard drive.
Which is still wrong, by the way.
Completely wrong. But we assume we hit save on an experience, and the brain tucks away this pristine video file.
Like a little MP4 file called Beach Vacation 2018.
Yes. And we think recalling the memory is just, double-clicking that file.
That is the great memory myth right there.
And it is the first major concept our source material today just completely attacks.
Modern neuroscience has totally abandoned the archive or storage model of memory.
Because it's not a retrieval process, is it?
No, not at all. The core function of memory is not a process of retrieval. It is a process of reconstruction.
Okay, let's slow down and really look at that distinction because it's huge.
It's everything.
Retrieval versus reconstruction.
Think about it this way. When you think of retrieval, you are thinking of pulling a complete intact object out of a box.
Like a bowling ball.
Right, a bowling ball. The object hasn't changed while it was in the box.
It's still just a bowling ball.
Exactly. But human memory does not store complete experiences in any single location in the brain.
So there is no single folder where Beach Vacation 2018 lives.
None. Instead, the raw sensory data of that experience is totally fractured.
Fractured how?
It's distributed across entirely different neural neighborhoods in your brain.
Okay, so the visual elements are processed and stored in the visual cortex at the back of the brain.
Yep, and the auditory elements are somewhere else entirely.
Wow. So it's all in pieces.
Exactly. The visual cortex holds the geometry of the waves and that harsh sunlight.
And the smell of the ocean.
The olfactory bulb holds the trace of the salt air, or maybe the coconut smell of the sunscreen.
And what about how I felt? Like being relaxed?
That's the amygdala. It holds the emotional resonance. Perhaps you were feeling profoundly relaxed, or maybe, a little anxious about a work deadline you left behind.
But these fragments are physically disconnected from each other.
They are structurally apart.
Then how do they ever become a single cohesive memory? Again, how do I remember the whole day?
That's where the hippocampus comes in.
The hippocampus?
Yeah, you can think of the hippocampus as the master indexer.
Like a librarian who knows where all the scattered pages are.
Sort of, yeah. When you attempt to remember that day at the beach, the hippocampus sends out these synchronized neural oscillations.
Which are what exactly?
Basically complex timing signals. It sends them to all those disparate regions of the cortex.
Okay, so it's signaling the visual cortex, the olfactory bulb, the amygdala all at once.
Right. It gathers up the fragmented sensory data and attempts to weave it all back together in real time.
Real time. That is wild.
Every single time you recall a memory, You are rebuilding it from scratch on the factory floor of your conscious mind.
Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy, because I think this is crucial.
Go for it.
If memory isn't pulling a pre-recorded DVD off a shelf, it sounds more like taking a massive bin of loose Lego bricks.
I love this analogy.
Right. So you have this massive bin of loose Lego bricks, and you're trying to rebuild a complex spaceship you saw a decade ago.
But you have no instruction manual.
None. And you have to dig around for the right pieces every single time you want to build it.
That's a highly accurate way to conceptualize it.
But it sounds exhausting for the brain.
It is a lot of work. And the most crucial element of your Lego analogy is that the environment in which you are rebuilding the spaceship, it affects the final product.
Wait, how does the environment affect it?
Because you are reconstructing the memory in the present moment, right? So the now inevitably contaminates the then.
Meaning, my current emotional state is going to influence which Lego bricks I pull out of the bin.
Absolutely. The variables of recall are incredibly sensitive.
So it's not just a clean rebuild every time.
No, your current mood, your present beliefs, your biases, even the immediate physical context in which you are sitting while remembering something.
You mean like if I'm cold or tired right now?
Yes. All of these factors actively alter the neural reconstruction process.
So if I'm remembering that beach vacation, but today I happen to be really stressed out, or maybe I'm unhappy with my partner who was on that trip with me,
the hippocampus might actually bias the reconstruction.
it might pull more negative emotional data.
Yes, or it might prioritize the memory of an argument you had while completely suppressing the sensory data of the beautiful sunset.
Just because I'm in a bad mood today.
Exactly. And it goes even deeper than just which parts of the memory you focus on.
Deeper how'd?
At a cellular level, the act of recalling a memory makes it physically unstable.
Unstable. What do you mean?
In neuroscience, this is known as the theory of reconsolidation.
Reconsolidation?
Right. When a memory is brought into conscious awareness, the neural pathways that hold it become labile.
Labile. Meaning they are pliable.
Pliable, malleable, subject to alteration. To put the memory back into long-term storage, the brain actually has to synthesize new proteins to literally rewire the connection.
Wait, just the act of looking at the memory forces the brain to resave it.
Yes.
And in that window of time, the file can be overwritten.
That is the biological reality.
That is terrifying.
During that window of reconsolidation, new information from the present moment can become physically tangled with the old information.
So the next time you recall the beach trip,
the memory will include the subtle edits made during the previous recall.
oh my gosh. I want you, the listener, to pause for a second and think of your absolute earliest childhood memory.
This is a great exercise.
Right. Bring it to mind right now. Maybe you're blowing out candles on a birthday cake, or falling off a bicycle, or playing in the snow with a sibling.
It feels incredibly real.
It does. You can see the colors. You can feel the texture of the moment.
But knowing what we just discussed about reconsolidation affects...
How much of that image in your head is a genuine, organic playback of that exact moment?
And how much of it is an impressionistic painting that your brain has touched up?
Edited, painted over dozens of times over the decades.
If we look at the data on early childhood amnesia and memory formation, it is highly probable that a vast majority of that specific early memory is a construct.
A construct. Just a fake.
Well, a patchwork quilt of source material.
Because I've probably looked at a Polaroid photograph of that birthday party 100 times over the course of my life.
Exactly.
I've heard my mother tell the story of me dropping the cake at family dinners.
And your brain, always seeking efficiency and a coherent narrative, takes the visual angle of that Polaroid photograph.
It takes the auditory information of my mother's storytelling.
And seamlessly integrates them to your first-person neural network.
So the visual memory you are experiencing right now, listener, might actually just be your brain recalling the photograph.
Not the event itself, but the source tags have been lost.
The source tags, like the metadata.
Right, your brain forgot where it got the information.
That is deeply unsettling. It's like we are constantly updating the software of our past without realizing the code is changing.
It's a very weird feeling to realize that about yourself.
And that naturally leads to a fairly dark question.
Let's hear it.
If our brains are constantly reassembling these Lego bricks of memory on the fly, and the process is this vulnerable to contamination,
yeah,
how easy is it to sneak a completely fake brick into the pile without us noticing?
The clinical research indicates that it is frighteningly easy.
Wow. Frighteningly easy.
And this brings us into the core of the source material today.
Which is what?
Particularly the foundational research into what cognitive psychologists call the misinformation effect.
Oh, the misinformation effect. The notes dive heavily into the work of Elizabeth Loftus here.
She is a pioneer in this field.
Her studies from the 1970s basically created this entire field of inquiry.
They did, and they really illustrate how fragile these neural Lego bricks are.
Let's break down the specifics of her most famous car accident study,
It's a classic.
because the methodology is just brilliant in its simplicity.
It is a watershed moment in cognitive science.
So how did she set it up?
Loftus and her team had participants watch short video clips of traffic accidents.
Just normal videos.
Yeah, these are just standard, relatively minor collisions, nothing gory.
Okay.
After watching the video, the participants were divided into different groups and asked a series of questions about what they had just witnessed.
And the most important question was about the speed of the vehicles, right?
Yes, but the researchers didn't ask everyone the same question.
They manipulated a single word.
That was the crucial variable, just one word.
What was the difference?
One group was asked about how fast were the cars going when they hit each other.
Okay, hit.
Another group was asked about how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other.
So they just swapped the verb hit versus smashed.
The linguistic framing is vital here.
I mean, they both mean a crash.
They do, but hit is a relatively neutral verb. It implies contact, but not necessarily severe devastation.
Right, like I bumped my knee.
Exactly. Smashed, however, carries a heavy semantic payload.
Semantic payload, I like that.
It implies high velocity, loss of control, and violent destruction.
So how did that one word affect the reconstruction of the memory for those people?
The group that heard the word smashed estimated significantly higher speeds than the group that heard hit.
Just because of the verb.
The mere presence of the aggressive verb caused their brains to reconstruct the visual memory of the cars moving much faster.
Which is fascinating on its own because it shows that a leading question can bias a person's immediate judgment.
But the researchers didn't stop there.
No, they didn't. They waited.
They waited a full week.
Okay, so 7 days later.
They brought the participants back into the lab and asked them a new set of questions about the video they had seen 7 days prior.
And what was the critical question this time?
Did you see any broken glass?
Okay, let's pause here. To be absolutely clear regarding the objective truth of the source material,
This is important.
there was absolutely no broken glass in the original video clip. Zero.
None. It was a minor collision. No glass at all.
But I'm guessing the people who are asked the smashed question a week earlier had a different reality.
Oh, completely. A statistically significant portion of the people who had been exposed to the word smashed falsely remembered seeing broken glass.
Wow. They literally hallucinated it into their memory.
And they didn't just guess. They were confident in their visual recall of the glass shattering.
If we look at the mechanics of this through the lens of what we just discussed about reconsolidation,
Right, the labile state.
the verb didn't just alter their description of the event. It didn't just make them want to please the researcher.
No, it retroactively altered the physical fabric of the memory itself.
The word smashed basically injected a gray Lego brick of broken glass into a pile of blue car crash bricks.
Beautifully put.
And a week later, the brain just built the spaceship using all the pieces, assuming they all belong there.
That is the perfect way to visualize the binding problem failing.
The binding problem.
Yeah, the brain took the semantic information from the questionnaire, the implication of a violent crash.
Right.
And over the course of a week, it bound it together with the visual memory of the video.
So they got tangled up.
Exactly. When the hippocampus went to retrieve the scene, it reconstructed shattered glass because conceptually, glass belongs in a violent crash.
And what I find so compelling about this is the subjective experience of the participant.
What they were actually feeling.
Yeah. When those people sit there a week later and say, yes, I saw broken glass, they are not lying.
Not at all.
If you hook them up to a polygraph, they would pass with flying colors.
Because a polygraph measures physiological deception.
Right. The stress of telling a lie.
To these participants, they're telling the gospel truth.
Their brain has constructed a new reality.
And they're simply reporting what they see in their mind's eye.
This specific phenomenon is what we call a source monitoring error, right?
Yes. The brain has the image of broken glass.
But it has lost the metadata regarding where that image came from.
It forgets that the image was generated internally as a logical inference based on the word smashed.
And instead, it tags it as having come externally from the video monitor.
It's a massive processing error.
The real-world applications of this are staggering. And the source notes spent a lot of time looking at how this completely upends the legal system.
It really should change everything about how we handle testimony.
So in most of modern legal history, eyewitness testimony was considered the absolute gold standard of evidence.
It was everything.
If a witness pointed from the stand and said, "That is the person I saw," juries treated it as an infallible recording.
The assumption was that human memory operated like a security camera.
But this research forces a radical reevaluation of eyewitness testimony.
It is now viewed with intense scientific skepticism.
Because we understand that the interrogation process itself is highly destructive.
Whoa, incredibly destructive.
If a police officer or a prosecutor asks a witness a leading question, even completely unintentionally, they aren't just risking a biased verbal answer.
They are physically contaminating the witness's neural network.
They are literally trampling all over a crime scene. But the crime scene is inside the witness's frontal lobe.
That is exactly what is happening. The implications for justice are profound.
It's scary to think about.
A witness can be inadvertently led to develop a sincere, deeply held conviction about a suspect's face or a sequence of events that literally never occurred.
Simply through the repeated phrasing of questions over months of trial preparation.
The reconsolidation window is opened over and over again, and new, contaminating information is layered into the memory trace every single time.
Let's expand on this idea of confidence versus accuracy.
Okay.
Because the sources mention another famous study that really hammers this home.
Yes, this one is amazing.
Not a laboratory experiment with car videos, but a massive real-world event.
The Challenger space shuttle explosion in 1986?
Yes, the flashbulb memory study by Ulrich Neisser.
It is one of the most elegant demonstrations of memory drift in the literature.
Let's define that. A flashbulb memory is a highly vivid, emotionally charged memory of a significant historical event.
We all have them. You know exactly where you were when you heard certain major news events.
Right. Feels like a flashbulb went off and illuminated the entire scene, freezing it in time forever.
Which was exactly the prevailing theory at the time.
So what did Neisser do?
The morning after the Challenger explosion, Neisser had his university students write down exactly how they heard the news.
Like, where were they? Who were they with?
What time was it? What were they wearing? He collected these incredibly detailed, fresh accounts and just locked them in a filing cabinet.
He captured the baseline objective truth of their experience.
Right. And then he waited.
For how long?
2.5 years later, he tracked down those exact same students and asked them to recall the event again.
Now remember, these are flashbulb memories. The students felt absolute certainty about their recollections.
But when Neisser compared their new memories to the actual handwritten notes they took the day after the event,
What happened?
the discrepancies were massive.
Really? Like, how wrong were they?
Some students had completely different narratives. They remembered being in different buildings with different people, hearing the news from different sources.
After only 2.5 years.
But the most vital data point from Neisser's study wasn't just the inaccuracy.
What was it?
It was the confidence metric.
Oh, wow. The students refused to believe they were wrong, didn't they?
Even when confronted with their own handwriting from 2 years prior, many students were bewildered.
I can imagine.
One famously said, "That's my handwriting, but that's not what happened."
That's not what happened. That gives me chills.
Their current reconstructed memory felt so visceral, so phenomenologically real, that they trusted it over a physical piece of paper they wrote themselves.
That is wild.
Yeah.
The subjective feeling of truth is completely decoupled from the objective accuracy of the data.
Totally decoupled.
The brain is basically saying, I don't care what the paper says, I can feel the memory in my bones.
Because the emotional resonance is still intact. The amygdala is still firing, signaling that this was a highly important, highly emotional event.
The brain confuses the intensity of the emotion with the accuracy of the details.
That's the core issue.
Okay, so altering a small detail of a real event, adding some broken glass to a minor crash, or blurring the details of where you were sitting during a national tragedy that's unsettling enough.
It shows the boundaries of memory are porous.
Very porous. But sources push this into far more terrifying territory.
This is where it gets really dark.
If the system is this porous, can the brain be tricked into manufacturing a complete complex event entirely out of thin air?
Like a full-blown Inception scenario.
Yes, exactly like Inception.
The literature confirms that it can, and this has been demonstrated repeatedly in controlled clinical settings.
So not just changing a word, but building a whole false narrative.
The malleability of memory extends far beyond tweaking details. It extends to implanting entire multi-layered narratives of experiences that never happen.
And in cognitive psychology, we refer to these as rich false memories.
Rich, meaning highly detailed.
The notes highlight a couple of foundational examples of this. The most famous is the lost in the mall technique.
Yes.
Researchers were actually able to convince participants of fabricated childhood traumas.
Which is incredible.
And in another variation, they convinced people they had suffered a severe physical illness after eating a specific food, like hard-boiled eggs or dill pickles, as a child.
The food aversion studies are particularly interesting because they result in behavioral changes.
Wait, really? How so?
Participants who were successfully implanted with a false memory of getting sick from hard-boiled eggs actually avoided eating eggs at a subsequent buffet.
You're kidding.
The fake memory dictated real-world behavior.
That is insane. Let's dissect the lost in the mall methodology, because I want to understand the exact mechanics of how a researcher pulls this off.
It's a very specific protocol.
How do you convince a rational adult that they were abandoned in a shopping center if it never happened? I would just say, no, I don't remember that, and that would be the end of it.
You would think so, but the methodology bypasses your rational defenses by utilizing specific social and cognitive vulnerabilities.
Okay, break it down for me.
To successfully implant a complex false memory, researchers utilize a multi-step protocol. It generally requires two fundamental ingredients to initiate the process.
What's the first ingredient?
The first is a source of authority or deep trust.
Okay, so you can't have a stranger in a lab coat just tell you it happened.
No, the cognitive dissonance is too high. The brain rejects it immediately.
Makes sense.
So researchers recruit the participants' parents or older siblings to act as confederates in the experiment.
Oh, that is sneaky.
Very. The participant comes into the lab and they are presented with a booklet containing 4 short stories about their childhood.
And these come from the family.
Yes. 3 of the stories are entirely true, provided by the parents.
Like going to Disney World or a specific birthday party.
Exactly. The 4th story is the fabrication.
And what's this fabrication?
That at age 5, the participant was lost in a specific local shopping mall, was crying, and was eventually rescued by an elderly woman before being reunited with their family.
So the deception is sandwiched between objective truths, and the trusted family member is the one providing the scaffolding.
It establishes instant credibility.
The participant reads this and thinks, well, my mom wrote this, and the first 3 are definitely real, so this mall thing must be a blind spot for me.
Exactly. The authority figure establishes the plausibility.
Okay, what's the second ingredient?
Once plausibility is established, the researchers deploy the second, more insidious ingredient. They encourage the individual to engage in vivid mental imagery.
Vivid mental imagery.
They use a technique called imagination inflation.
Imagination inflation. How does that work in practice?
Over a series of interviews, spaced a few days apart, the researcher asks the participant to try to remember the mall incident.
But they don't remember it, right?
Initially, most participants say they have no memory of it.
So what does the researcher do?
The researcher responds encouragingly, "That's perfectly normal for early memories, but I want you to close your eyes and just try to imagine the local mall where this happened."
They prompt them to build the scene.
Right. Think about what the floor looked like. Think about the sounds of the stores. Take your time and try to visualize it.
And because the participant trusts the premise, they comply.
They want to be helpful.
They put active cognitive effort into building the scene in their mind. They start pulling those Lego bricks out of the bin.
That's it, exactly.
They imagine the shiny tile floors, the echoey mall music, the panic of not seeing their mom.
And that is exactly where the neurological trap snaps shut.
The trap snaps shut. How?
This is where we run into a critical functional limitation of the human brain.
Which is?
It is notoriously bad at reality monitoring when imagery is involved.
Reality monitoring.
It's the cognitive process we use to distinguish between internally generated experiences like dreams, imaginations, or hallucinations, and externally derived experiences like genuine sensory perceptions.
Wait, you're saying the brain struggles to tell the difference between something my eyes actually saw and something I just daydreamed really hard about?
In terms of the neural pathways activating, the difference is shockingly minimal.
Really?
When you look at fMRI scans of a brain actively looking at an apple versus a brain vividly imagining an apple, the visual cortex lights up in incredibly similar patterns.
Wow.
The brain is utilizing the exact same hardware to render the mental image.
So as the participant sits there imagining the mall, their visual cortex is actually firing. Their auditory processing centers are imagining the echoes, and their amygdala is simulating the childhood panic.
Yes. And over the course of a week, as they repeatedly engage in this imagination inflation, the mental image becomes richer.
It acquires sensory details.
And remember what we discussed about source monitoring?
The metadata tag.
Right. The brain loses the tag that says, I generated this image on a Tuesday in a lab.
It just forgets where the image came from.
If a mental image feels real, if it has rich sensory details attached to it, and if it carries emotional weight, the reality monitoring system eventually just fatigues.
It gives up.
It looks at this robust neural network and categorizes it as a historical fact.
And by the third interview, the participant comes back and says, oh, I remember it now. The lady who found me, she was wearing a blue sweater and she smelled like peppermints.
They start inventing details to flesh out the lie.
And then they permanently store the lie as their own life history.
They have successfully synthesized a memory out of thin air using the raw materials of their own imagination and the conceptual prompt from a trusted source.
How many people does this actually work on?
Around a quarter of participants in these types of studies develop rich, false memories.
A quarter? That's huge.
It is a significant cognitive vulnerability.
Okay, I have to push back here because this paints a very grim picture of human cognition.
I get that a lot.
If our cognitive system is this fragile, if it is this easy to hack, how can you or I or anyone listening to this deep dive trust any of our foundational memories?
It's a fair question.
Isn't this a massive catastrophic bug in our neurology? I mean, if my memory is just a vulnerable suggestion box that accepts any vividly imagined slip of paper, how did our species even survive?
Right.
We should be constantly hallucinating our own past.
That is the most natural reaction to this data. It feels like a devastating design flaw, like a glitch in the software that needs to be patched.
It really does.
But modern cognitive science has completely flipped the script on this.
Look to hell.
The consensus is that this malleability isn't a bug at all. It is a vital, carefully calibrated evolutionary feature.
I'm going to need you to connect those dots. How does a highly editable, easily corrupted memory system help me survive better than a perfectly accurate, objective recording device?
The misunderstanding stems from what we assume memory is actually for.
We assume it's for remembering the past.
Right. We assume memory evolved to keep a historical record of the past. But evolution doesn't care about history for the sake of history.
Evolution only cares about survival.
Exactly. Evolution only cares about survival in the future. The human memory system is not a filing cabinet. It is a simulation engine.
A simulation engine.
It is optimized for prediction and meaning-making.
So the brain is less interested in where I was on a specific Tuesday 10 years ago and more interested in what that Tuesday can teach me about tomorrow.
Precisely. To navigate the future efficiently, your memory ruthlessly prioritizes the gist and the emotional core of an experience over pedantic, granular detail.
It prioritizes the gist. It reminds me of the way a Hollywood screenwriter adapts a true story for a movie.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Right, because a meticulous court stenographer wants every single comma, every cough, every stutter in the transcript.
They want the raw data.
But a screenwriter doesn't care what color shirt the protagonist was wearing, or if a conversation happened on a Monday or a Thursday.
They care about the emotional beats.
Exactly. They combine 3 different real-world people into one character to make the narrative tighter. They blur the facts to elevate the underlying truth of the protagonist's journey.
The screenwriter is optimizing for narrative impact, just as your brain is optimizing for behavioral impact.
That makes so much sense.
Your brain doesn't need to retain the exact velocity of a car crash, or the precise shade of the broken glass, or the color of the Lego bricks.
Because retaining all that data is biologically expensive.
Very expensive. It just needs the generalized lesson. Intersections are dangerous. Pay attention.
This concept of cognitive load is so relevant for the modern listener. We talked so much about information overload in our daily lives.
It's a real modern crisis.
We are bombarded with texts, emails, news feeds. What you are saying is that the brain's tendency to blur and edit is actually a defense mechanism.
It is saving you from drowning in data.
It's doing us a massive favor by dropping the pedantic details. We don't need a perfect archive. We need a functional, lightweight summary.
And we have clinical proof of what happens when that editing function fails.
Oh, really? There are people who can't edit.
Yes. There is a rare neurological condition called highly superior autobiographical memory, or HSAM.
HSAM.
The most famous case study is a woman named Jill Price. People with HSM have an incredibly rare inability to forget.
They just remember everything.
They can tell you exactly what they were wearing, what the weather was like, and what they ate on a random Wednesday 20 years ago.
This sounds like a superpower, like the ultimate party trick.
It sounds like a superpower until you listen to them describe their lived experience.
Is it bad?
Many people with HSM describe it as a profound burden. Their minds are constantly flooded with irrepressible, highly detailed memories.
So they just can't turn it off.
Never. It creates massive cognitive interference. Because they remember every specific instance with such granular clarity, it can actually be difficult for them to abstract concepts, to recognize broader patterns, or to let go of minor grievances.
The clutter of the past paralyzes their present.
Exactly. The flexibility of memory, the very thing that makes it vulnerable to the misinformation effect and false memories, is the exact same neural mechanism that allows you to imagine the future.
Wait, remembering the past and imagining the future use the same mechanism?
Yes. Neuroimaging shows that when people are asked to remember the past and when they're asked to imagine a future scenario, a largely overlapping network in the brain, including the default mode network, lights up.
So we use the fragments of our past to actively construct simulations of our future.
Yes. If your past was rigidly locked in stone, your ability to creatively plan for a changing environment would be severely compromised.
That is incredible. So if our brains are essentially Hollywood screenwriters, freely adapting the raw footage of our lives to help us survive and predict the future, how do they handle the most important character in the script?
You mean ourselves?
Right, because we are the protagonists of our own movies. Does the screenwriter edit us too?
Constantly. Relentlessly. And that brings us to a major theme in the source material, the concept of autobiographical memory and the narrative self.
The narrative self.
This is the ongoing, internalized story we tell ourselves about who we are, where we came from, and where we are going.
And the central revelation here is that your life story is not a static text.
Not at all.
It's a living document. It's like a wiki page that is constantly being refreshed.
It is continuously revised, edited, and heavily redacted to align with your current self-concept.
Psychologists refer to this as maintaining narrative identity, right?
Yes. We have a fundamental psychological need for our lives to make sense, to have continuity.
The sources offer a really universal example to illustrate this: a painful romantic breakup.
It's the perfect example of memory revision.
Let's trace the lifespan of that memory. Imagine you go through a terrible, heart-wrenching breakup in your 20s.
We've all been there.
In the immediate aftermath, the first month or so, the memory of that event is raw.
Visceral.
It is overwhelmingly negative. You remember the exact cruel things they said. You remember crying on the kitchen floor. You feel utterly rejected.
Your narrative role in that specific memory is the victim.
That is the immediate, unedited phenomenological experience.
But let's fast forward 5 or 10 years.
Okay, 10 years later,
Yeah.
you have grown. You've established a career you are proud of. You've done some therapy. Perhaps you've met someone who is a much better match for you.
Your self-concept has evolved drastically.
Drastically. When you look back and recall that exact same breakup a decade later, the emotional valence of the memory has shifted.
It's totally different.
You might view it with a sense of detached wisdom. You might even feel profound gratitude for the heartbreak, recognizing it as a necessary catalyst that pushed you toward your current happiness.
But wait, let's look at the mechanics of this.
Yeah.
The objective facts of what happened in that kitchen a decade ago did not change.
No, the tears were real. The cruel words were spoken.
The physical physics of the room are identical. So what exactly did the brain change?
It changed the story.
The brain engaged the psychological immune system to reduce cognitive dissonance. What changed was the protagonist's arc.
The arc, yes.
Right.
Over those 10 years, your identity shifted from victim of circumstance to empowered survivor.
But your brain requires a coherent backstory to support that new identity.
So the screenwriter goes back into the editing room of your autobiographical memory and does a punch-up on the script.
Exactly. It retroactively changes the lighting of the scene.
I love that. Changing the lighting.
The memory is recontextualized. The brain foregrounds the memories that support your current self-image.
Like suddenly you clearly remember all the red flags you ignored early in that relationship, which proves to you that you are much wiser now.
Simultaneously, the brain neutralizes, blurs, or simply deletes dissonant memories that don't fit the new empowered narrative, like how desperate you felt begging them to stay.
It just wipes that part out.
Or blurs it so much it doesn't hurt anymore.
That is a deeply empowering concept, honestly.
Right.
It means we are constantly curating our past to make sense of our present,
We are our own PR team.
Our identity isn't a statue carved out of granite. It is a fluid, shimmering projection.
Well said.
We are actively self-made, not just by what we do, but by the story we choose to weave out of what we've done.
It is empowering on an individual level. It allows for resilience and post-traumatic growth.
Right.
But it introduces a massive, often painful layer of complexity when we step outside of our own heads and interact with other human beings.
Right. It is wonderful to curate your own internal story in isolation. But we don't live in a vacuum.
Here is where the friction happens.
What happens when your highly curated, heavily edited, beautifully subjective personal narrative crashes head-on into someone else's perfectly curated narrative?
This is the classic holiday dinner phenomenon.
It is. This is the anatomy of every argument you've ever had with a sibling, a parent, or a spouse.
You ruined that vacation.
No, I didn't. You ruined the vacation. I was just trying to keep everyone on schedule.
It's a clash of scripts.
If our memories are this pliable, this prone to error, and this relentlessly edited to make us look like the rational heroes of our own stories, does that mean our personal histories are just pure fiction? Are we all just walking around hallucinating our relationships?
Not at all. But answering that requires us to elevate our understanding of epistemology, the theory of knowledge.
That sounds complicated.
It's not, really. We tend to treat truth as a rigid binary. Something either happened exactly as we remember it, or it is a lie.
Black or white.
But the source material provides a vital philosophical framework here, breaking truth down into two distinct categories: objective truth and narrative truth.
Okay, let's clearly define those for the listener, because this distinction changes everything.
Let's start with objective truth.
Objective truth is the verifiable physics of the universe. It is the audio recording. It is the undeniable timeline of events.
Yes? The researchers use a great anchor for this: a physical photograph of a day at the beach.
A photograph.
That photograph captures a moment in time objectively. It records the exact angle of the sun, the specific color of the towel, the objective, measurable distance between two people sitting on the sand.
Because a camera lens does not have an ego to protect.
Right. It does not have an emotional state. It simply records the bouncing of photons.
That's objective truth. But then we have subjective or narrative truth.
Which is entirely different.
This isn't about the photons. This is about the phenomenological experience. It is the meaning, the emotional weight, and the significance we derive from the event.
Correct. When you close your eyes and think back to that day at the beach, you aren't recalling the pixel data of a photograph.
Your narrative truth is the memory of the warmth of the sun on your skin. It's the profound joy of companionship you felt.
It is the specific pang of nostalgia you feel right now as you remember it.
Scientifically speaking, your narrative truth is highly inaccurate regarding the physical details. You might remember the towel being blue when it was actually red.
But the narrative truth is infinitely richer and vastly more important to your psychological survival than the objective data.
This reframes every interpersonal conflict imaginable, doesn't it?
It really does.
When two people recall a shared event drastically differently, our immediate knee-jerk instinct is defensive.
We accuse the other person of lying or gaslighting or just having a terrible faulty memory.
I remember it clearly, so you must be making things up to spite me.
That is the default human assumption. It's often called the Rashomon effect.
But understanding the reconstructive, deeply subjective nature of memory changes the geometry of conflict entirely.
It takes the venom out of the argument.
It is highly probable. In fact, neurologically, it is almost guaranteed that both people are telling their own absolute truth.
They are both just reading the script that their internal Hollywood screenwriter handed them.
And both screenwriters had completely different agendas.
Exactly. Your partner's brain encoded the memory of that argument based on their unique insecurities, their emotional state at the time, and what they need to believe about themselves today.
And your brain did the exact same thing.
This realization is the foundation of genuine empathy.
Empathy, yes. True reconciliation in a relationship doesn't require establishing a single, sterile, objective history.
It doesn't require finding hidden CCTV footage to prove who was factually right about the timeline.
That is a fool's errand. True reconciliation requires the radical acceptance of multiple, coexisting subjective realities.
Your narrative truth is valid, and my narrative truth is valid, even if they contradict each other on the physical details.
We can acknowledge the pain the other person felt without having to agree on the objective facts of the trigger.
That is the ultimate takeaway for navigating relationships with this knowledge.
So, to synthesize everything we've unpacked in this deep dive, Memory is not a passive archive.
No, it's not.
It is an active, highly creative, beautifully flawed negotiation between what happened in the past and what it means to us right now, today.
And that leads to the final, perhaps most powerful philosophical takeaway from the sources we analyze today.
Let's hear it.
As human beings, we often wish for a perfect memory. We get frustrated when we forget a name or a face or the details of a great trip.
We think an immutable, perfectly accurate memory would be a blessing.
But the data suggests it would be a curse.
Because if you couldn't edit the past, you couldn't change the protagonist, you would be trapped.
Exactly that. Neurological revisionism, the very mechanism that makes our memories unreliable, that makes us vulnerable to misinformation, that blurs the edges of our childhood.
It's the exact same mechanism that allows us to learn from our mistakes without being crushed by them.
It is what allows us to find profound meaning in our suffering.
It prevents us from being anchored forever to an unedited, rigid version of our past selves. The blurring of the edges is what gives us the psychological breathing room to grow.
It's a beautiful way to look at our flaws.
Which brings us back to that massive old-school library we talked about at the beginning.
The one with all the dusty books.
Right. We want the books to just sit on the shelf, perfectly preserved in dust. But if the books are constantly being rewritten, if the ink is always wet, maybe that's exactly how it should be.
A static library is a dead library.
A constantly revising mind is a living one.
It is the ultimate adaptive mechanism.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
Even something to chew on.
Something that builds on this idea of the ever-changing narrative self.
Okay.
If your memory is essentially just a story being aggressively edited by your present self to fit today's emotional needs, what will your future self decide to edit out of today?
Oh, wow.
When you think you are forming a permanent, unshakable core memory right in this very moment, are you actually just providing a rough, highly disposable draft for a stranger you haven't even become yet?
A profound question to end on. It truly makes you appreciate the fragile, fleeting nature of the present moment.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you a new lens through which to view your own history.
It's been a great discussion.
Stay curious. Be incredibly mindful of the powerful stories you are constantly telling yourself. And remember to be kind to the stories of others. We'll catch you on the next one.